Hi there, and welcome to Oaklandside 510. I'm Tasneem Raja, editor-in-chief of the Oaklandside, Oakland's independent, non-profit newsroom. It's our first episode of the year. Happy New Year. We're going to help you start off 2026 by getting informed on what to expect in Oakland in coming months. Our editors are going to share what they see as the biggest news stories in 2026, at least as far as we can tell right now. Then I'm going to share some hopes and dreams for Oakland's future that Oakland residents shared with our newsroom recently. Before we get to all of that, here's a word from our very first ever podcast sponsor, the Oakland Museum of California. You know what makes the Oakland Museum of California special? It's the only place that tells California's multifaceted story through art, history, and natural science, all under one roof. Right in the heart of Oakland, OMCA celebrates the people, cultures, and landscapes that make this state unique. You'll always encounter something new in its 3 core galleries and in special exhibitions like Good Fire, Tending Native Lands, and Black Spaces, Reclaim and Remain. From their beautiful garden filled with California native plants to amazing events like Thursdates and Spotlight Sundays, OMCA is designed to spark community connection. Visit museumca.org to plan your trip. OMCA, where California comes alive. Thank you, OMCA, for that message and for supporting this show. All right, now let's look ahead to 2026 and some of the big stories we're expecting to cover this year. To help me figure that out, I am joined by 2 of my colleagues, Esther Kaplan, our deputy editor, and Darwin BondGraham, our news editor. Between them, they edit all 6 reporters in the newsroom. Esther, Darwin, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Hey, Tasneem.
Okay, Darwin, let me turn to you. So you edit Natalie Ornstein on housing, Natalie and Eli Wolf on City Hall, and Rosalind Romero on public safety. So what are your reporters looking out for?
Yeah, one big question this year is political. It's whether Barbara Lee will run for re-election.
That's the question.
She won the special election in April 2025 and took office in May, but her term runs out at the end of 2026.
Yep.
She hasn't said publicly whether she's going to run again. She'll be 80 years old when her term ends, but she has created a committee to raise money for this upcoming election. That's a pretty strong signal.
It is. Okay, if she does run, who do we think is going to challenge her?
Yeah, I think we have no idea at this point, but Lauren Taylor ran against her in the special election and lost by a pretty narrow margin. Mm-hmm. Could he run again? We'll see. The mayor's race is definitely one to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. It feels like we just caught our breath from covering the last one, and here we go again. And there's another big one coming up this year, district attorney.
Yeah, this could be a slugfest. Pamela Price, who was recalled in November 2024 by nearly 63% of voters, she announced in early December that she's running again in the primary. She's positioning her campaign as a fight against billionaires, corporate corruption, and people aligned with Trump. She specifically called out Philip Dreyfus, the man who pretty much single-handedly bankrolled the campaign to recall her.
I got to ask, Darwin, were you surprised that Price is running again?
No.
Okay. She'll be running against Ursula Jones Dixon, the current DA who was appointed after the recall.
Right. And Jones Dixon has said that she trusts the judgment of Alameda County voters who recalled Price. But Price is arguing that the current national landscape and dissatisfaction with how the county is responding to Trump's policies has compelled her to run again. During Price's tenure, a federal judge also ordered her office to review over 24 death penalty cases where prosecutors in past decades had systematically excluded Black and Jewish people from juries.
Yeah.
Some people sentenced in those cases have been removed from death row, and one man's conviction was overturned.
Yeah, we've done a lot of reporting on those cases. Okay, what about the FBI corruption case? Where does that stand?
Yeah, the trial for Shang Tao, Andre Jones, and David and Andy Duong is set for October 2026. All 4 of these defendants have pleaded not guilty to the bribery and conspiracy charges. But here's the interesting part. So in December, all 4 of these defendants filed motions trying to suppress evidence from those FBI raids that happened back in June 2024. They're arguing that the FBI relied on an unreliable informant. We've identified that person as Mario Juarez. He appears to be the person prosecutors are calling co-conspirator one in the indictment. They say that the FBI withheld information about Juarez's background from the judge who issued the search warrant.
If you want to hear more about that colorful background, check out an episode we published last year, really digging deep into Juarez's history and his life in Oakland. So, Darwin, what happens if the courts agree and the evidence does get thrown out?
Well, the entire case could just collapse. And that's why this is such a big story to watch in 2026. Will any of the defendants cave in and plead guilty, or will the FBI's case unravel? And it's not just focused on Oakland. Remember, the feds also indicted Brian Azevedo. He's a San Leandro City Council member. Things could expand way beyond there if the feds think they can make cases against other elected officials in the region, roll them over, get them to plead guilty, and inform on other people. So Natalie, Eli, and I and other reporters in our newsroom are going to follow this really closely.
Okay. What about the budget? So can the city finally get this huge structural deficit under control?
This is like the never-ending catastrophe for Oakland. People might remember in June of last year, the city council passed a 2-year budget that closed this $265 million deficit. But one council member called it the nobody's happy budget.
Right.
It kept all 25 firehouses open and funded 678 police officers, but it slashed vacant staff positions and cut high-up administrative roles. The budget also banks on voters approving $40 million in a new parcel tax for 2026 for public safety, but there's no guarantee voters will go along with that.
Right.
And there are ongoing concerns about federal funding cuts under the Trump administration. So Oakland is bracing for nearly $25 million in federal funding cuts in 2026, a 34% decrease from the previous year. That'll impact housing, homelessness services, youth services, public safety, public health programs, probably more.
Yeah.
Also, immigration enforcement is a major concern. Trump is using mass deportations right now to advance his agenda. People will recall that, there was a protest and a standoff at Coast Guard Island in October. There was briefly some violence by federal agents who tried to break through that protest line. That sort of flare-up could happen again.
Yeah.
We've also done some reporting about how the TSA is sharing passenger data with ICE. These are lists of travelers passing through airports. ICE can apparently cross-reference their deportation databases with this information. Oakland airport officials say they're in the dark about whether this is happening here, but it's something our reporters will be tracking.
Yeah. Now, another thing that I know your reporters are going to be looking into is something that may or may not be on Oaklanders' minds, but we think should be. It's what's going to be happening with the Alameda Health System.
Yeah. Alameda Health System runs Highland Hospital, several other hospitals, the John George Psychiatric Hospital. It's the safety net hospital system for our region. They're facing major cuts because it's anticipating the evaporation of a huge part of its revenue due to federal healthcare cuts.
Yeah.
This is going to be really bad for the community if they have to lay off more people at AHS.
Okay, last question for you, Darwin. Rosalind has been reporting that crime dropped significantly in Oakland last year. Do we think that trend will continue?
That seems to be a bright spot for the past 2 years now. Will it continue into 2026? Oakland ended 2025 with 57 homicides. That's the fewest since 1967, which is that's an astounding statistic for the city of Oakland. Violent crime overall was down about 25% compared to 2024. Homicides, assault, rape, robberies all saw double-digit decreases. Even auto thefts were down by nearly half.
Yeah, that's huge. This is great news. Do we know what is driving these drops?
Experts and politicians are all saying it's a combination of factors, probably the end of the COVID pandemic, targeted approaches to gun violence, That includes the integration of community groups with anti-violence efforts. In Oakland specifically, city leaders say the ceasefire strategy, which focuses on the small number of people at the highest risk of gun violence and offers them services, that this strategy seems to be making a difference. The city rebooted ceasefire in early 2024.
Yeah, so the question remains, can we expect these trends to continue?
Yeah, exactly. Oakland still experiences a lot more crime than other mid-sized cities. And the new year has already started with violence.
Yeah.
There was a triple shooting on International Boulevard on January 3rd that killed 3 people. Mayor Barbara Lee has said that even with historic progress, gun violence remains a real and urgent concern. So Rosalind will be tracking whether the downward trend continues through 2026 or whether we see crime to start tick back up again.
Hey, Esther. So you edit Ashley McBride on education, Jose Fermoso on roads and transit, and Azucena Racia on arts and culture. What are your reporters going to be watching in 2026?
Well, let's start with Ashley, who's going to have her hands full with Oakland schools.
No doubt.
The superintendent search is happening right now. The school board hired a search firm back in October, and they're aiming to have a permanent superintendent selected by April. This comes after the board ended Kyla Johnson Trammell's contract early last year. We still don't know exactly why.
Right.
And brought in Denise Sadler as interim superintendent. Her term runs through June. Now, Johnson Trammell had been the superintendent for 8 years, a period where she made major strides in stabilizing the district's enrollment and budget. So her departure was a pretty big deal.
So is there a chance that interim superintendent Sadler becomes the permanent superintendent?
Well, she's acting like it. She personally shows up when schools are in crisis, like when Skyline High had a student shooting in November, and she's pushing the board hard to deal with the district's massive deficit. It's not really a seat warmer vibe that she's giving off.
Got it. Okay, and of course, this big leadership decision is happening while OUSD is dealing with massive budget cuts.
Oh, yes. In December, the board approved a plan to cut $102 million from next year's budget. That's more than 10% of the entire unrestricted general fund.
Yeah.
So school sites could see their budgets reduced by up to 10%, and the central office is looking at truly brutal cuts of up to 50% in some departments.
Wow.
One of the most concerning things on the table is special education, because the district is proposing a $12 million cut to special ed. And parents, as you can imagine, immediately raise concerns about this because federal law actually requires districts to maintain spending levels year over year.
Right.
And then on top of everything, the district is in contract negotiations with the teachers union, and it's not impossible. We have another strike this year.
Oof, okay. So, I mean, obviously, whoever becomes the next OUSD superintendent is walking into a really tough situation here.
Right. And Sadler exacted a board commitment to talk about school closures, the third rail, or mergers to address long-term structural problems. The board has been very resistant to this, but Sadler, the interim superintendent, has really insisted that OUSD can't get to a sustainable place without closing schools. And people will remember the really contentious efforts by the district to close and merge schools in 2019, 2020, 2022. And as Ashley's reported, the results were really mixed. Some mergers saved modest amounts of money, but others actually increased costs.
Okay, yeah, thanks for all of that context. What else is Ashley going to be looking at?
Well, safety on campuses, it's going to be a major issue. Last November, as I said, there was a student shooting at Skyline High. That was the third lockdown there in the fall semester alone.
Wow.
Students staged a huge walkout to protest what they called unsafe conditions. And then there was that devastating tragedy at Laney College in November when Coach John Beam, who had also been the longtime coach at Skyline, was shot and killed on campus. And so meantime, a city grant to fund violence interrupters at several Oakland high schools runs out this spring, and the district is, as we discussed, too broke to pick up the tab.
Yeah.
So Ashley will be very closely following whether the city decides to find money for this urgently needed program.
Okay, so what about Jose? What is he going to be covering on roads and transit?
Jose is going to be tracking a big infusion of money into Oakland's infrastructure. Oakland finally sold a big tranche of Measure U bonds in December. Bonds the voters approved 3 years ago for affordable housing, public works. And the city told us the bond sale will pour more than $50 million into road repairs for the fiscal year ending this coming June. And other money will go towards safety improvements like expanding bike lanes, accessibility interventions like more curb ramps, and the money will pay for upgrades to Liberation Park in East Oakland, libraries, senior centers, stormwater repair, much needed stuff.
All of that is huge. We know from this really excellent piece that you and Jose published in December, Oakland's roads are in really bad shape.
They are. We found that hundreds of Oakland roads have no life left, according to the city's own experts.
Wow.
The good news is the bond sale marks really a financial turning point for the city. In 2024, worries about the city's finances had completely stalled the effort. But this successful sale in December shows that investors are confident in Oakland again. So We're going to see improvements to roads, buildings, and Measure U has authorized additional bond sales down the road. Jose will also be watching what happens with BART. There's a potential bailout measure that could go to voters' ballots this November to address the transit system's ongoing financial challenges, which are quite serious.
Yeah. Now, it's also a big year for sports in Oakland. I know Jose is always up for covering that.
You know, I just learned that his uncle was a professional soccer player who played for the Mexico national team back in the day.
I did not know that.
So he gets his fandom honestly. But yeah, the Super Bowl and the World Cup are both coming to the Bay Area this year. We'll track watch parties for sure. And Oakland is getting its first professional women's American football team, the Golden State Storm.
Wow.
They're going to be playing at Laney Field starting in March.
That is really cool.
So Azucena Garcia, our culture reporter, will be covering how these major events impact Oakland's arts and culture scene and how the city shows up during this big sporting season.
Great. Okay, speaking of arts and culture, what else are you guys going to be covering?
Well, a few things. An Oakland icon turns 100 this year, the Grand Lake Theater.
Wow.
And the Oakland Public Library's beautiful main branch turns 75, so we'll be finding a way to celebrate that history. Coming up this Saturday is the public memorial service for another Oakland icon, Coach Beam, who we mentioned earlier was shot this fall, and that's at the Henry J. Kaiser Center for the Arts. Later this month, the center celebrates its grand reopening. Soon they'll be staging the Tina Turner musical, a Gypsy Kings concert, and a public conversation with Oakland's own Kamala Harris. Another story we'll be watching, the impending announcement of a new cultural affairs manager for the city. As listeners may remember, that position was eliminated in the city's austerity budget last June, and it's now been restored after a long fight.
Yeah.
So whoever's hired, and the city said more than 200 people applied for the job,
Wow.
will have their work cut out for them, pulling in outside donations and grants to support the cultural life of the city. That's the job. Lastly, Boots Riley has a new movie coming out in March after 8 years since his dystopian film Sorry to Bother You came out. This one's called I Love Boosters. It is apparently about a crew of retail thieves led by actress Keke Palmer, and it is premiering on the opening night of South by Southwest in March, and we hope will come to theaters here shortly after that.
Oh, that is very cool. All right, I'm definitely going to keep an eye out for that. Okay, again, Esther, thank you. Darwin, thank you so much for this preview. 2026 is going to be a very busy year for Oakland journalism. I am so glad that you guys and your reporters are the ones keeping Oaklanders informed.
Of course.
Thanks, Tasneem.
Thanks.
All right, to close us out, I'd like to share some words from Oakland residents about their hopes for the future of Oakland. So these came from an event that we put on in October called Future Oakland. We had Mayor Barbara Lee, Kev Choice, a co-founder of the Ballers, the CEO of the Black Cultural Zone, our friend Liam O'Donoghue from East Bay Yesterday, and others in really interesting conversations about Oakland's past, present, and future. It happened at Block 15 in Jack London, and we had a great crowd. Here are some messages that attendees shared about their dreams for Oakland. Let me read some of these out for you in their own words. So one person said they want to see small business back and booming. Another person, better 911 response times, cheaper rent, bring back Hero Day, more street fairs downtown, housing for everyone, including designated safe encampment space with showers. One person said a beautiful new park in place of 980. Another said keep 980, but put decks with parks on top, light rail transit, less loud motorcycles, continued backing for the Ballers, Roots and Soul, and the return of more major sports. Treat Deep East Oakland and West Oakland the same as Piedmont and Montclair. Here's another one. I want people who live in East and West Oakland to have access to equitable health outcomes. Have macro services more available. Cleaner, safer streets. Better, faster, cheaper transit and more bike lanes. International Boulevard getting redeveloped. Better schools in all neighborhoods. More shopping and retail, more small businesses, dedication to cleaning up our streets, peace and safety for Black women in our homes and in shared spaces. That's just a small sampling of the dozens and dozens of dreams for Oakland shared by Oaklanders that night. You can see more on Oaklandside's Instagram account. Thank you to everyone who shared your message with us at Future Oakland in October. All right, that is this week's episode of Oaklandside 510. You can find all the stories we talked about today at oaklandside.org. Sign up for our daily newsletter to get this reporting delivered to your inbox. Thank you to OMCA for sponsoring today's episode. If your company, organization, pickleball league, book club, household wants to sponsor an episode, get in touch. If you haven't already, please subscribe to this podcast. Share it with your Oakland friends and neighbors. Rate it on Apple Podcasts. I love reading your reviews. The more people listening, the more we're going to keep this show going. The episode was produced by Kiana Mogadam, edited by Esther Kaplan and Darwin BondGraham, and hosted by me, Oaklandside Editor-in-Chief Tasneem Raja. On behalf of our entire newsroom, thank you for showing up for Oakland. We'll see you next week.